Hello, Black Eagles. Welcome back to the Black Eagles podcast. Today, I'm basically going to give you a Black Eagle VIP podcast for free. As you know, we usually do live streams right after our games in the league. We usually do a show on Monday, and for our European games, we usually do a show on Friday. It doesn't always give us the time or really the opportunity to react in depth to everything that's happening around the club, especially in a busy time of year as the transfer period, as the summer is. So what we usually do is I give my reactions, my thoughts, and all that kind of stuff in VIP exclusive shows, which you can access through hitting the join button on YouTube or going to patreon.com/Beşiktaş podcast and subscribing there and becoming one of our many Black Eagle VIP members. But today I'm going to give you a taste of that for free, so to speak, because an important press conference took place today, kind of a State of the Union address almost from Serdal Adalı, but a good press conference, I thought, with a lot of good takeaways from the press conference. So let's get started and dive straight into it. So Serdal Adalı did confirm that the Dikilitaş project is going ahead as planned. The planning has been done and the permits have been requested. However, the Ziraat Bank is apparently no longer part of the project, and the club are looking for new banks in order to join the project. But the permits have been requested, so that's a big step, at least in the right direction. So other than leaving room for neighbors essentially to object the project, we are very close to getting started, I guess. This is, of course, still going to take a few months. I don't know exactly how long people have to file an objection. I don't know exactly how that works in Turkey. I think in Belgium you have about 2 months or something, where I live, obviously, to do so. This is very normal, by the way. Also, when we built our new house, people had the time to look into the house project, the design, or whatever, and if anything bothered them, they were able to file an objection. Fortunately for me, they didn't. But this is essentially as well what they will be able to do for Dikilitaş. So this is very standard, but it's good to hear that the project at least is moving forward. But I am curious how that's going to work on the financing side of things if the Ziraat Bank aren't a partner going forward. So it'll be interesting to see, and hopefully we'll hear something rather quickly, whether or not a new bank will be participating. By the way, credit to Ural Alhan, our resident financial expert, for writing down these notes, making things easy for me, and he added some good comments here for this as being a financial aspect of the club. So there's no mention of the club notifying progress members, which was essentially promised to be sent after 45 days after the last press conference. So they were supposed to be, I believe, notified of the project, of the Dikilitaş project moving forward and all that kind of stuff. So that hasn't happened apparently. And then there's also an advisory committee that has been formed from former players to advise for the youth academy. There's also a rejuvenation of the technical staff. That's all stuff that's been talked about. I mean, I don't really have that much to add to that. I mean, I think it's good to see involvement from former players, but we've also seen that turn very toxic with Samet Aybaba as a recent example. So you shouldn't just include, I think, former players in an advisory role for the youth academy just for the sake of it. These need to be people that are competent and that have the best interest of the club at heart. With Samet Aybaba, I think there was a lot of self-interest there. I know a few things about back in 2012, 2013, when he was at the club at the time. He involved I believe his brother-in-law, who was an agent, in some of the transfers like Sinan Kurumuş and stuff like that. So, we don't want those types of former players, people that are looking to line their own pockets. I'm not saying Samet Aybaba was only there to fill his pockets. I do believe that in his mind he had the best he had good intentions for Beşiktaş. I won't say the best intentions, because I think if you have the best intentions, you wouldn't profit of the club. But yeah, so it depends, I think, who is going to be part of this advisory board or advisory committee for the youth academy. We've also heard that Serdal Adalı is going to be head of the academy, I believe. That was mentioned a few days ago. So the former head, I forget his name, Mehmet Ekşi maybe. I think he's gone. Serdal Adalı takes that function now. I mean, we talked about Serdal Adalı in the last couple of months, of course, given his role at the club, caretaker role as a coach. I don't think he's a particularly great coach. I also don't think he did a particularly fantastic job with the academy. If you look at what Felix Kavlak has been doing since Serdal's departure, I think Felix is doing a better job as a coach, but that doesn't mean that Serdal doesn't have other capabilities. And maybe, I obviously don't know all of his competencies, but maybe he is the right man for this role. I don't think he's necessarily the best coach, but I mean, I wouldn't be either, I think there's a lot of people with a lot of good competencies that aren't necessarily going to be a good coach. I think there's a lot of people who would be a good coach but aren't going to be a good sporting director, aren't going to be a good youth director. So, I mean, everyone has their abilities, and hopefully Serdal Adalı has the competencies to take that role. The training complex is also going to be renovated. I mean, I swear that got renovated just a few years ago under Ahmet Nur Çebi. There's also been a request filed for a plot of land near the airport for new training facilities with the Ministry of Sport. Yeah, that makes sense, because I think now we had a lot of facilities in Dikilitaş for the academy. I assume this also has to do with that, because obviously with the Dikilitaş project, those facilities will have to move elsewhere. I believe previously they were talking about moving them to Akatler or something, or Akaretler. But maybe I'm not quite clear on this, whether this is regarding that. Don't really have much to add to that. Part of the Youth Academy's proceeds of future transfers to be used for the Youth Academy development. So I guess that means if we sell players from the academy, so for example, Demirege, Semi, a portion of that is going to be reinvested in the academy. That's a weird way to put it, I think. Like, why would you, let's say tomorrow we sell, let's take Jetson as an example. We sold Jetson for 20.7 million plus an additional 7.3 million in potential add-ons, so that totals 28. Club record if it totals to that, if it ends up going that high. Why don't we use money of a portion of that towards the academy? Are we only going to use proceeds from academy sales for the academy? That doesn't necessarily make much sense to me. Also, something he mentioned, and I think this is not necessarily super important. Well, it is important. I mean, we paid apparently a total of 16 million euros last month in obligations towards former players. Abubakar, Amarte, Montero, Rebic, Onur Bulut, even Woral and Umut Meraş were mentioned. So all these players still had outstanding money to be paid, and I believe even Ural didn't include this in his listing here, but I believe Boyko, who was signed way back in 2016, and I believe I saw Pepe was in there as well. Pepe was mention of 80 million lira in outstanding fees towards agents from players and stuff like that. So this is really a 16 million euro payment that goes back to the Ahmet Nur Çebi presidency, which is only a couple of years ago, but even all the way back to 2016, almost a decade ago, Boyko, Pepe, who came also that summer. So a lot of money that was still owed over the last almost decade. A lot of that has been paid off now this past month. He didn't mention, I don't think, whether there were still other outstanding payments like that. But I mean, I think this does illustrate how difficult the job is. Oh, in fact, here, I glossed over it, but yeah, a total of 80 million, 1.7 million euros, so 80 million lira, to be paid in manager fee cases which the club lost, apparently. So these are like court cases that were still outstanding because obviously we didn't pay the manager fees or the agent fees that were involved in those transfers from Boyko, from Pepe, all that kind of stuff. So that's stuff that really goes back further. Then obviously Aboubakar Amartey, this is all on Montero. Yeah, that's all the last 5 years. So that's all Ahmet Nurçebi. Yeah, in fact, I think except for Worrell, all of these are Ahmet Nurçebi. So yeah, that does illustrate how difficult the job is for the administration, for Adalı. But it's good to hear that they are actually paying these fees. They are not letting this drag out further and leading to even more future court cases we will inevitably lose anyway, and we'll end up paying more because you'll have to pay a fine, all that kind of stuff. Things that Ahmet Nurçebi was really good at, dragging these things out, letting them go to court, and then having to pay more than you originally had to pay, all just to save a buck on the short term. It's good to see that Serdal Adalı is taking responsibility and is paying up and is not allowing the club to be further harmed by fees that you have to pay inevitably anyway. And that is also something he mentioned, that bad transfers from the past are currently hampering the current period. There's no room for mistakes. It's something that Ole Gunnar Solskjaer has repeated repeatedly as well. And I think, that point is perfectly proven by the fact that we had to pay 60 million euros last month on transfers that, let me just go back. Aboubakar, gone. Amartey, gone. Montero, gone. Rebic, gone. Onderbulut, gone. Worrell, gone. Umut Meraş, gone. Pepe, gone. Boyko, gone. All these players are long gone, but we're still paying for them. And these, I have to give props to Adalı, because the players he signed, Tammy Abraham, Orkun Kukçu, Ndidi, even Jurásek, even though that's only a short-term transfer, they talked a little bit about that. These aren't just short-term moves necessarily. These are guys on good ages. Orkun 24, Jurásek just turned 25 or is about to turn 25. Orkun will turn 25 in late December. Ndidi is 28. Tammy is turning 28. He still has to turn 28. So these are all players that are in their physical prime still. Okay, fair enough. Ndidi has had some injuries over the last couple of years. I think if you would ask Leicester fans, is Ndidi in his physical prime, they might say no. But in terms of his age, he's 28 years old. Jurásek about to turn 25. Orkun about to turn 25. Tammy still has to turn 28. These are all players that you can build around, and we're going to get to that a little bit later. But this is a different sort of transfer policy than we've seen in the past. And you have to give him props for that. I think that, okay, you can never have 100% success rate with transfers. I don't think there's a club in the world who has that, unless they transfer like one player in a window and he happens to work out. But if you transfer 5-6 players, like all of them being a huge success, that the chances of that are slim to none. So yes, there isn't room to make mistakes, but at the end of the day, transfers are never 100% gonna pan out the way you'd want them to. But I think that in terms of age, in terms of profile, we are making the right moves right now. It's a lot better than in the past, at least we can say that. Of course, that doesn't mean that in 6 months or in 12 months we won't be saying, oh, that wasn't a good move. It can still happen. But like, for example, Oxlade-Chamberlain, like, you didn't need to wait 12 months. Yes, he could have been great, but the chance of that was very slim. And given what we knew going into the move, we knew that the possibility of it succeeding was not great. With Jurásek, with Tammy, with Orkun, with Ndidi, these aren't high-risk moves. Yes, they're high-risk moves because Tammy and Orkun cost a lot of money. So, yes, in that regard, it's high risk. But they aren't high risk in the sense of looking at their profile, looking at their track records, looking at their injury histories. Okay, Tammy's had one big injury, but other than that, he's been pretty injury-free throughout his career. Orkun hasn't had any big injuries. He's consistently played a lot of matches for Feyenoord and for Benfica. Has also been a very, very consistent performer. And Ndidi has had some injuries, but even he has consistently played more than 30 games every season for the last 8 years or so. Jurásek is a little bit of a risk, but he's alone. So in that regard, I think we're doing a little better in that. He also commented that these transfers are going to change the team chemistry and are still in the middle of their careers, as I just said, and have ambition and can be sold again. That is true. Tammy, one good season in Turkey. The way he started right now, 4 goals in 3 games. If he continues to score, obviously, look, it's St. Patrick's, but it's perfectly plausible that he bags another 2 on Thursday. It's perfectly possible that he gets on the score sheet against Lausanne. It's perfectly possible that he scores on the weekend. I'm just saying, it's perfectly possible Tammy goes into a 20-plus goal season this season. If he stays fit, I think the fact that he's already on 4 goals right now, him scoring 20 goals, seems like a no-brainer, especially if we get wingers. So Tammy having a successful season, being an English homegrown player, that gives him a lot of added value. I'm not saying if he's a big success that I want him to be sold, but I'm saying if he is a big success, there will undoubtedly be interest there. Orkun, just 24 years old. I think he's going to be a lifer. I think he's going to be the player we build around. I always go back to the example of Hans van Aken at Club Brugge. He came at a similar age to Club Brugge, 24, 25 or something like that, and he's been there close to a decade now. He's in his early 30s now, but he's still the leader. He's still their star player, and he's somebody that they kept domestically, could have easily gone to the Premier League, was good enough for that, but didn't. Orkun is the same. I think we will build around him in the next decade or so. But if for some reason or another Beşiktaş have to sell, there's always that possibility. And Ndidi, he's 28. Realistically, I don't think he falls into that category of can be sold again. I think Ndidi, if he does really well, of course, there's the possibility that he still gets sold in 2 years. He will only be 30 years old at that point, or 31. There's still that possibility for sure. But I think Ndidi, if he does well and he settles, I think he will probably stick around for a good couple of years, and then probably I don't think we will see a return on investment for him in terms of the transfer fee, but hopefully we will see a big return on investment on the pitch. And that's also something that was central to the press conference from Adalı. He basically said we are not going to be signing 30-year-old plus players anymore. And if we are going to offer them maximum 1-year contracts. In general, I think that is a good way to go. If you are going for a 30-plus-year-old player, you offer them a 1+1 year deal. Now, look, that's easy to say at this point, and at the moment, that is clearly what they're doing, because as we said, we've signed 4 players, 24, 24, 27, 28, so nobody 30-plus at the moment, so that is great. But obviously, we might be in January, and we might be in a position where, God forbid, somebody important gets injured, and we need a quick fix. And the easiest quick fix will be a 30-year-old plus player. And that player doesn't want to come on a 1-year contract or a 6 months plus 1 year contract. Maybe he's demanding a 2-year contract. It's easy said now is what I'm saying, but when you're worked into a corner, you might be forced to break that promise, so to speak. But I think it's a very good mindset to have and to go off. And I'm not against signing 30-year-olds. I think every team needs a healthy balance of experience and youthly enthusiasm and talent. Um, but of course, talent can also be 28 years old, like Ndidi, like Tammy, 27 years old. It doesn't have to be 30 plus. However, of course, if you're going to buy 27, 28-year-olds, Tammy cost us 15 million, Ndidi cost us 8. You're gonna end up paying higher transfer fees. Whereas with 30-year-olds or 30-plus-year-olds, you can usually get them cheaper because they're older and they don't have that much sell-on value. But I think it's a good statement to make. Also, a good statement to make publicly. It's good that Beşiktaş are at least striving to no longer be a retirement home. I think it's a very positive. And Adalı also mentioned that he could have finished transfers before the Shakhtar game. He mentioned that if we would have gone for 30-plus-year-old players, we could have signed them in early July. But again, he's making the point of we don't want to make those mistakes again. We don't want to rush things, and we don't want to make the same mistakes as in the past. Essentially, fans need to be patient. He is right in saying that. I agree. We all need to be patient, including myself. We are all a little bit too greedy as fans. I think we want everything and we want it now. That does not mean we cannot criticize. I think the fact that we have not brought in a left winger is something that deserves serious criticism, because I think that is one of the most glaring issues in this squad, is not having good wingers. We only essentially have 2 wingers, Kenny Arroyo and Milot Rasica. Those are our only 2 pure wingers. João Mario isn't the winger. Ernest Mucci isn't the winger. They're playing there, but they're not wingers. Mustafa Hekimolo isn't the winger. Simi is gone now, but he wasn't the winger either. So we essentially only have 2 wingers in our squad. Milot Rasica is 1, he isn't good enough. And Kenny Arroyo, he's 19 years old. He needs to grow, he needs to learn. He has a lot of talent, but Ole right now is very much easing him in, if I can call it that. So essentially, we only have 1 winger, 2 halves, I'd say. Rasica is like half a winger, and Kenny right now is like half a winger. Kenny could be more, I think, but he needs to play more. So that is a big problem. I agree. Yes, fans need to be patient. We also cannot expect us to completely rebuild the team in one transfer window, because I'm seeing a lot of people say, oh, we need central defenders, we need a goalkeeper, we need this, we need that. Look, we've signed a left back. That was something we really, really needed. With the departure of Masuaku, we really needed it, but I think also we needed to move on from Masuaku. I know a lot of fans kind of got convinced of, no, let's stick with Masuaku. We had a great season, at least statistically. But I think at 31, 32 years old, Masuaku physically declining. Okay, he's gone back to the Premier League. He's gone back to Sunderland. I really wish him the best. I think all the best to Arthur Masuaku. I think he was in a way a great servant, but he's aging at the end of the day. Nobody can outrun Father Time, and I think it was good for us to move away from an aging fullback. So I think that was a good decision. So we brought in a left back. Then we brought in an opportunity signing with Orkun, somebody we can build around for the future. So that is very important as well. It wasn't necessarily a top priority for us, but Adalı also mentioned that Beşiktaş have always won championships with a passing number 8 and with a holding number 6. So Ndidi and Orkun, the way he was framing it, were essential signings because he thinks that's the only way Beşiktaş can be successful. He doesn't believe that Beşiktaş are going to be successful with his words, soft number 6, a passer like Musrati. He's not saying Musrati isn't a good player. He is saying that doesn't really fit what Beşiktaş has been successful with in the past. Now, personally, I believe you can be successful in different ways, but on the other hand, we've also seen Musrati, for how we have constructed our squad, just doesn't work. I think if you want to utilize somebody like Musrati, you need to make him very important in your midfield, almost like how Pirlo was central to the success of Juventus, and later Pjanic was successful to the success of Juventus. Those are also softer number sixes, but with fantastic vista and passing. Musrati, I'm not gonna say he's Pirlo, I'm not gonna say he's even Pjanic, but he has also a really good vista. He also has a really good passing game, but defensively he's not that good. He doesn't have a great motor. So I think in order to make somebody like that work, you need two other midfielders that play in function of him, or at least alleviate the defensive workload from him. And that is not something we have. That's not how our squad is built. I think the way that we are building the midfield now with Ndidi, who's a holding number 6, a defensive number 6, ball-winning number 6, and then we have the passer, the playmaking number 8 in Orkun, who can also play a little bit higher up as a 10 if necessary. I think that makes more sense, and both for Ole and any manager in the future, I think that is easier to utilize and to make work. So I think that makes more sense. And yeah, so I think that was a good point by Adalı as well. So those transfers, in his view, were essential. I think Ndidi and Orkun. Personally, I think you could have easily continued with Jadon, not bring in Orkun profile. I think if you have the opportunity to bring Orkun, you almost have to do it, because it is a generational talent, a generational transfer, and I think it is the only sort of transfer that justifies selling Jadon. Because in my opinion, Jadon was our second best player last season, and in the previous seasons he was probably our best player. And I think last season only Rafa Silva was better. So in order to justify selling Jadon, you had to bring in a crazy good number 8, and I think we brought in exactly that. And then Ndidi, yeah, we needed a number 6. We knew that already. And Ndidi is, I think, a great signing in that regard. Of course, we have to wait and see how he turns out. But he's been a fantastic player for Leicester over the years, and I've seen him at Genk as well before that. Of course, it's a long time ago. It was great there. I think Ndidi will be good for us. And then Abraham, also a very important signing. I think I said this in our live stream in the past. I think 1A and 1B is a good striker to replace Chiro, and 1B is a good winger. And you can interchange which is the most important. But the striker and the winger were, in my opinion, the two most important transfers. A lot of people said no, the winger is the single most important. Personally, I thought the striker was as important. But regardless of what side of that argument you fall on, whether the winger was more important, whether the striker was equally important or more important, there's maybe people who thought that. Personally, I didn't. I thought they were equally important. But no matter what side of that argument you fall on, the winger was essential, and it hasn't happened yet, and that deserves criticism. Yes, fans need to be patient, but the winger should have been the first or second transfer that was resolved, and it wasn't. That is something Adalı deserves criticism for, and he should accept that. I also accept that fans need to be patient, and I think things like a right back, things like a right central defender, things like a goalkeeper, even things like a backup striker, which I personally think is essential. I think it's super, super important. But even things like that, I think are stuff that can be pushed down the road and can be done later. That doesn't have to come right now. And we have to also acknowledge and accept as fans that a club needs to utilize the full duration of a transfer window, because dynamics change, asking prices drop, and conditions change. For example, we're going to get to this in a little bit, but players might become that seem unrealistic in July and August or in the beginning of August might suddenly become a lot more realistic at the end of August, start of September. And so we need to accept that as well. There are going to be opportunities later in the window, and that is, in my opinion, when you try and fill out your squad as good as possible. Adalı doesn't want any blame or gossip whenever he resigns from this job. So every decision is taken carefully. I don't. These are Ural's notes, so I'm not quite 100% sure what he means by that. He doesn't think he is late with transfers per se. Looking at the last and competition. Yeah. Well, I mean, look, I think the competition had a lot less homework than us. We had an entire squad to rebuild. Fenerbahce somehow managed to do the same thing every summer, even though they don't have to. They somehow managed to they somehow end up rebuilding their entire squad every season or every 2 seasons. But yes, Fenerbahce haven't done that much on the market, I would say. Not particularly that much more than we have. They've lost a couple of important players from the last 2 years, like Tadic and Dzeko. They brought in Duran, they brought in a couple of other players. Galatasaray have been relatively quiet, but Galatasaray have won 3 titles in a row. They are in a position where they don't need to sign 6, 7, 8 players. They are fine maybe with signing 4 or 5, although one of the big glaring issues with them is the goalkeeper, of course, and they're late with that for sure. But it's not because the other clubs are also late that we aren't late. So I don't agree with that. I think we are late with the winger transfer. I think if we would have signed the winger already, personally, I'd be a lot less critical, because I think if you sign the winger, you solve a lot of the big glaring issues, and then you can start working towards the squad depth a little bit more. I personally think that the right back transfer it's important, but I think we could go another season without Svensson. I think if you are realistic and you acknowledge that we probably aren't going to win the league this season, why would you have to bring a right back already that you know to win the league? Let's form the skeleton of the team first, and that's also something that Adalı addresses. But I think that's something we need to do, and we are doing that with the signings of Abraham, Orkun, and so on. This is also a note that I already talked about. We changed from a tough midfielder profile to a softer midfielder profile with Musrati and Pjanic. Midfielders were bought for the sake of buying a midfielder. I honestly think that's kind of true. I think not just the midfielders, I just think players in general. I think we bought a lot of players for the sake of buying players. Not to say that these are bad players, but I think that, and this is something that Ole has talked about as well, is that Beşiktaş are like an amalgamation of different profiles, but profiles that don't really fit together. I think we've been buying we've been buying defenders, we've been buying strikers, we've been buying midfielders, but all players that, if you look at them individually, are probably good players, or maybe, in the case of, like, for example, Rebic, somebody that on paper looked good, but, over the hill. Oxlade-Chamberlain was, in my opinion, never a good idea, unless it was for very reduced wages. I think you could have taken the punt if he had a low wage, but at 3 million a year, that's a no-brainer. That's retarded. That's like, you don't need to have an IQ of above 80 to know that's going to go bad. But I think, that's the biggest issue for Beşiktaş over the years. Not necessarily that, for example, that we signed softer midfielders like Musrati and Pjanic. I think it's more the fact that we never had midfields that accommodated those players. Like I was talking about earlier, if you have a Musrati, if you have a Pjanic, if you have a Pirlo, your midfield needs to be able to support that. You need to have if you're going to play 3 midfielders, you're going to need 2 other midfielders that are able to alleviate the defensive workload of that number 6, which is essentially just a deep laying playmaker and not really a defensive midfielder. So your 2 8s or your 6 and your 8, if you play 2 6s, are going to have to take up a lot of that workload, and we didn't have that. We didn't have those profiles. Yes, we had Jetson, but then our second midfielder was Salih Uçan, or it was now Rafa, who, like, that doesn't make sense. That those puzzle pieces don't fit. It doesn't fit. It's like trying to put a square, what they call it, a square peg into a round hole or something. It just doesn't work. Our squad construction doesn't make sense. He also mentioned that the left winger transfer and the right back transfer are the priority right now. Left winger, fully agree with it. Right back, like I said, I think you could go another season with Svensson. I think, honestly, a right winger would be better, depending on how much Ole plans to utilize Kenny going forward. Because if I have to watch another full season with predominantly Rasica on the right winger position, I'm gonna gouge my eyes out. Like, that's just, like, that is not a fun thing to look forward to. I would much rather go into the season with Svensson as our starting right back than Rasica as our starting right winger. I'll put it that way. Then we get to the next point where Adalı mentions that we're going to build the foundations, the skeleton of the team first. We need solid starting 11 players, after which we can start looking into young players as per the initial plan. That's not always, I feel like, how they presented it, but this is, in my opinion, I've mentioned this on the show before, this is also the way to go. This is how Club Brugge did it. They invested in players like Hans van Aken, in players like the goalkeeper Simon Mignolet, in players like Ruud, what's his name? Ruud. The midfielder, Dutch midfielder, he's gone now, but he won the golden schoen in Belgium. Ruud, come on, can't remember his name, but they invested in older, more experienced players. Hans van Aken wasn't that old when they signed him. I think he was 25, 26 maybe. But they invested, but that is, I mean, look, that is 26 is not old, but that's not 18, that's not 19, that's not 20, that's not 21. If you look at Club Brugge now, they are signing a lot of players in those age categories. But that is because they have established that skeleton of a team. They have the players that know the club inside and out, that represent the club, that carry, that are able to. They have the Roy Keanes of the world. I'll put it that way. I think at Manchester United it was really important for the young players when they were coming through that there were players like first was it Bobby Robson or Bobby Charlton, Roy Keane, those guys in the 90s when the class of 92 came through, when Gary Neville, David Beckham, Ryan Giggs, Paul Scholes, when all those players started coming up, there were already Bobby Robson, I think, and Roy Keane, and you had Cantona, and you had those older players, Teddy Sheringham, who helped those players to settle in, who also kept them in line when they stepped out of line and stuff like that. I think that is what we need to do, and that's what we're in the process of doing right now with Orkun, with Tammy, with Rafa, with Felix Udukai, with Mert, with those players. And then I think, once we establish a proper skeleton of the team, then we can start bringing in more talents like Kenny. I think we kind of did it backwards, honestly, because he said as per the initial plan, but you brought in Kenny and Ricardo as your first two transfers in January, so I think you kind of had it backwards. I personally am happy we signed Kenny. I think he's a talent, but I think we signed him at the wrong moment in a way, because I think if we would have had an established team and then brought him in, it would have been easier for him. He also asked the journalist not to mention transfer fees since it influences the negotiations. I think there's a lot of talk about finances, there's a lot of talk about wages, there's a lot of talk about transfer fees, and the media plays a big role in and influences negotiations quite heavily. But honestly, I think what the Turkish journalists do, it pales in comparison to the influence that Fabrizio Romano has. If Fabrizio Romano drops a name that we're negotiating with, suddenly 2-3 other clubs wake up and enter negotiations and stuff like that. So it's a request you can make, but at the end of the day, I think if the foreign journalists aren't going to listen to it. The same goes for false names like Rashford. Has influenced severance discussions with current players. The club has enough money to buy Rashford, so the club has enough. The club has enough money to buy Rashford, so I want all my fees. In that regard. Okay, so as they mentioned, I think that after Beşiktaş signed Orkun, they initially had an agreement with Oxlade-Chamberlain for him to walk away and take 1.4 or 1.5 million euros of a severance package. And even though he has this year, I think he's going to earn 2.5 million plus 500 more thousand euros or something of his supposed signing bonus that was spread over 3 years. So essentially, he makes 3 million a year. So Ox had reportedly agreed to walk away for 1.5 million and accepted payments in installments. But then when news came out that Beşiktaş are interested, as I heard, once he learned that we were signing Orkun, to him that's like, oh, the club has money, so they can just pay me everything and they can pay it all at the same time and all that kind of stuff. Which, I mean, to me doesn't make any sense, because if you see, okay, Beşiktaş are signing Orkun, okay, your initial reaction could be, oh, that means they have money, so they can just pay me all my money. But then if you see that, then you undoubtedly also see the fact that Beşiktaş aren't paying anything in year one and are paying the transfer fee of 25 million spread over 5 years. So I don't understand if you jump to the conclusion of, oh, they have money, they can pay me on everything, but then you also see that, oh, they actually aren't paying anything right now, so that means they mustn't have money, right? So that doesn't really make a lot of sense to me. He gives the example of Rashford here, but we didn't end up signing Rashford, and I'm sure that somebody like Ox is smart enough to know that rumors are just rumors. But Orkun absolutely materialized, so there's a fair point on his part there. But I don't think the conclusion is logical on his part. He also mentioned that they're not going to sign another left back, I should say, just because the fans want to, just because the fans reacted negatively to David Jurásek after one game, essentially. That doesn't mean they're just going to sign another left back because the fans are throwing a hissy fit. And he's 100% right there. We decided for David Jurásek, for better or for worse. Personally, I said this from the beginning. I think offensively he's going to contribute a lot, but I think defensively he's going to leave somewhat to be desired. And I likened him to Caner Erkin in that regard. I think once we stabilize the team, once we start playing our own football, once we have wingers, I think that David Jurásek will not be a massive issue. In fact, I think he will contribute a lot offensively, and I think people will forget. I think people will forgive him the occasional defensive lapse if he contributes enough offensively, and he strikes me as a player that will. And I think even if he doesn't turn out well and he does end up bombing, I don't think it's a good idea right now to start scrambling for another left back. Now, Ridvan Yilmaz has been mentioned, and I personally think Ridvan Yilmaz is one of those players that wait until the end of the window. Maybe Rangers will be more inclined to let him go cheap or to loan him even. The fees that were being rumored in the media, close to 4 million, we got 3.8 million for him when we sold him 2 years ago, when he was a big talent, or medium-sized talent, and 21 years old. Why on earth, after 2 years and a lot of injuries, and the fact that he hasn't worked out at Rangers and they want rid of him, why would we pay more than what we got? That makes no sense to me. And I don't think we should play along with that game. So you just wait it out. And if there's an opportunity to sign him cheap, at the end of the window, or even when the window in Scotland has closed already, then maybe bring him in. But the conditions will need to be right. I think if you're going to pay more than you earned on him, that's stupid. If you're going to break even, that's stupid. I think if you earn 3.8, you should be paying maximum 2 million. Max. And I don't even think you, honestly, like, he'll have like 1 year left after this year. I don't know. He also said that he's backing Ole Gunnar Solskjaer. He has no doubts about him or the future. He completely trusts him, essentially, and that journalists and everyone needs to stop with creating chaos and start giving constructive feedback instead of just being all over the place. And I fully agree with that. I think it's so easy to blame the coach, but the problems within the squad are so much deeper, and it's something that's not going to be solved by yet another coach sacking. We need to overhaul this squad, and the reality is that the majority of the squad is still inherited from Ahmet Nurçebi and a little bit from Hassan Arad, and it's just something that's going to take time. And bringing Sergen, bringing Şenol Güneş, right now, it's not going to change anything. We saw already what Şenol Güneş managed to do with an Ahmet Nurçebi squad, right? A couple of 2 years ago. And initially it looked okay because Abubakar decided to score world-class screamers every week. But, that mask fell off after he stopped doing that. And we started seeing that, the football was never good. And now Abubakar isn't scoring ridiculous goals anymore. And now it doesn't work at all. So that's not going to change now. Şenol Güneş isn't going to come in magically now and get us to play world-class football again. As long as we don't have wingers, no coach is going to be successful. We need to be patient. And changing the coach is not the solution. We need to just be patient, and we need to continue forming the squad. And once the squad has been properly formed, then you can start judging a coach. Until then, it's essentially unfair. So it's good that Adalı finally speaks out on this. I think he should have done this a long time ago. I think he should have done this as soon as that shitstorm happened after the initial Shakhtar game. He should have stepped up then. Generally this press conference I think was really, really good. I think he said a lot of the things that he had to say. I just wish he'd said it 2 or 3 weeks earlier. He also mentioned how decent of a man Ole Gunnar Solskjaer is, and that he doesn't complain in the media or anything like that. Because he could, right? Like, he could be complaining right now about the media. He could be complaining about the fact that we haven't gotten a winger yet. He could be doing a lot of stuff, but he's a team player. He knows the situation of the club, and he made this decision conscientiously to step into this project, and he's a good man to stick with that as well. So Adalı is going to reciprocate that, hopefully, and be decent to him as well. Nobody dared to come when Ole came, is what he essentially said. Ole did so, and we're gonna give him the time he needs. That's also a good point. Sergen didn't want to come 6 months ago. Okay, he had a difficult situation with his brother, but he even said this team is going to eat us alive. So he didn't want to come. I'm sure Şenol Güneş, if he wasn't at Trabzon at the time, would have come because he seemingly is desperate to take any job. But I think any ambitious coach, or even, I don't know if you can call Sergen an ambitious coach at this point, because he works for TV more than he works for clubs. But I think any coaches that aren't, desperate for a job didn't want this job. And Ole wasn't one of those, by the way. He has been waiting for years for the right opportunity to come along. And he stepped into this despite the fact that it was a very, very difficult task. But he wasn't desperate for just any job. He could have taken a lot of other jobs, and he didn't. He liked the opportunity that was presented here, despite the challenges. And I think that in itself as well deserves him credit and more time than you would give to Şenol Güneş, for example, because he would just take any job. That might be unpopular, that opinion, but I think Ole deserves the time, and I agree with that. He said to stop mobbing, and that we need to protect the players and treat them like family. I agree with that, but we're gonna get to it a little bit. He's going to literally start naming people, 3 teams of trolls creating misinformation and unrest. Okay. Fans need to unite more. Current situation is hurting the club. I fully agree with that. And then he gave a reaction to the referee situation in the Galatasaray game. And then there was the Q&A. And in the Q&A, there was a lot of interesting stuff. But I think the main takeaway from the Q&A was the fact that he addressed Jadon Sancho. And Jadon Sancho, that was the first question that was asked. And look, I think kind of the body language confirmed 2 things. He mentioned we really, really want to bring in Jadon Sancho, but the player also needs to be willing to come to Turkey. I think that confirms 2 things. We have clearly been in for Sancho for a while. He also confirmed that later on that we've been in talks with Sancho for 1 to 1.5 months already. We have been in contact and we have been trying. But yesterday evening, I think Alfredo Pedula said that, or no, this morning, I think even Alfredo Pedula said that Sancho's camp said Sancho said no to Beşiktaş's offer. I don't know if that necessarily confirms that, but I do think what it confirms is that we are not Jadon Sancho's priority right now. I think that's logical, He has options from the top 5 leagues right now. Juventus are interested. Dortmund are interested. Atletico Madrid are supposedly interested. With Dortmund, it's complicated. Their fans really want him back, but the club, the board, doesn't want him. And that is mainly because of the financial implications. And I understand that. I don't think Dortmund are going to do it. Dortmund are a club that has gone bankrupt in the 2000s. They know what not to do financially, I think. I don't think they're going to make such a mistake. I don't think Dortmund are going to end up signing him unless, because this is apparently, I didn't know this, but apparently this is his last year of his contract. There are possibilities there, of course. Manchester United right now really want to offload Sancho, really want to offload Anthony. I think as closer as we get to the closing of the windows, United are going to get more and more desperate to offload. And because of how financial fair play works, I think it's perfectly plausible that Man United are going to be willing to take a transfer fee for Sancho. Let's say 15 million, or let's even say 20. He's only 25 years old, keep that in mind. So, it's perfectly justifiable for Dortmund to pay 20 million euros for him. The big issue is he's on £300,000 per week. Now, after tax, that is roughly 8.5 to 9 million euros net. Dortmund are never gonna pay that. They just aren't. However, what I could see is Dortmund paying, or Dortmund or any club, paying 15 or 20 million euros transfer fee. But United will keep paying a large portion of that wage. And Sancho, he knows I am never going to get that type of a contract anywhere unless I go to Saudi. So for him, keeping that last year of guaranteed, let's call it 9 million euros net at United, and then after that playing for 4.5 million net for the next 3 years, that is still a good deal for Sancho. So that is something I could see happening. The closer we get to the deadline, the more inclined United are going to be to do a deal like that. And the reason they would be willing to do a deal like that is because the 15 or the 20 million they get in, they can use towards their balance check, essentially, for financial fair play, for outgoing and ingoing, because the wages are on a different, that's different, that's calculated differently in the way they, in the way that works. So I think that could happen, something like that, where United get a decent fee, 15, 20 million, decent fee, but they will continue to pay, let's say, 50% of the wages for Sancho. I could see something like that happen. Now, the question is, how quickly are United going to falter in their resolve? And how long are clubs like Dortmund, like Juventus, like Atletico de Madrid willing to wait for their winger? I think Beşiktaş are going to be in this until the end. I think right now, Beşiktaş are not a priority for Sancho necessarily. Although I definitely think that 4.5 million comments on his Instagram post will probably have gotten his attention a little bit. But right now, I think we are not a priority for him. I think he is still thinking Dortmund, he's still thinking Juventus, he's still thinking maybe Madrid. There's options there that are more attractive sportively. But the longer a transfer stays out, the longer something isn't going to happen in that regard, I believe Beşiktaş's chances will increase. And I'm of two minds. I think that the winger transfer is really, really important. So playing this game is super risky, because this is essentially what we did last season with Angelo Gabriel from Chelsea, if you'll remember, who ended up going to Al Nassr in the end. So it is almost a risk that we cannot afford to take, because that fucked up our season last season. I mean, a lot of things fucked up our season last season, but I think not making a decent winger transfer was very detrimental to our entire season last year. And if we are going to gamble on waiting for Sancho, that is a really, really, really big risk. It has also got a potentially huge reward, because I believe that Sancho could have a Quaresma level impact. I think that's the level of talent he is. I think the fact that how he performed at Dortmund, even last season at Chelsea, people say he flopped at Chelsea, but that's not true. Chelsea wanted to retain him, but they didn't want to pay him the £300,000 a year. They wanted to give him £180,000 per week. Instead of £300,000 per week. Sorry for that. That was supposed to be per week. But they wanted to retain him. They just didn't want to agree to those absurd contract demands. But he had a decent season with Chelsea. Not great, not amazing, but good. He wasn't terrible. It wasn't a flop at all. I think what he's shown, especially at Dortmund, but also at Chelsea, shows that he, at 25, still has a lot to offer. And I don't think, I saw Mehmet Demirkol today say that Sancho is like Dele Alli. Like, the risk is similar to Dele Alli. I think that's nowhere near true. I think Sancho, if he were to come, and as long as he takes it seriously, that is very important. That's always important, no matter who it is. I think if he's motivated, if he comes, that is not a question of can he find his former glory again, like with Dele Alli. With Dele Alli, it wasn't just is he motivated. I think Dele Alli is motivated. I think at Como now, he has been motivated. I think for Dele Alli, it's much more deep. It's much more spiritual. He is a broken man because of what happened in his life. I think the fame went to his head to a point where he started abusing recreational drugs and stuff like that. I think his problems lie way, way deeper. I think for Sancho, it's more of a confidence issue at United. also a break with Den Haag, but also the club. The trust with the club is gone. I don't think he wants to be there. But I do think Jadon Sancho still very much wants to play football. The fact that he's gone back to Dortmund for a loan spell, the fact that he's gone to Chelsea for a loan spell, it's not because he's unwilling to waver almost 4 or 3.5 million euros in net guaranteed earnings to stay at Chelsea. He doesn't want to do that. It's not because he doesn't want to do that the only thing he wants is money. I think it's, if you were in his shoes and you had a 9 million euro contract for 1 more year, would you accept taking 5.5 million euros a year and just dropping 4.5 million in the garbage bag? I wouldn't. I don't think I would. I mean, that's 4.5 million euros. That's a lot of money. So I think he's definitely still wants to play. Otherwise, he wouldn't have gone out on loan. He could have sat on his ass for the last 18 months, not gone to Chelsea, not gone to Dortmund, and just sat on his ass at United and just rake in his money and train with the reserves. He could have done that, but he didn't. He did go on those loan spells. I think he is still very much motivated to make something out of his career. I think he just needs the right environment for that. I think Beşiktaş can offer him that. I know that our fans can be really, really toxic, but our fans can also be really, really stimulating for players. If you see how Beşiktaş rekindled Ricardo Quaresma's career, and yes, I know it's kind of a double thing because we rekindled it, but then kind of extinguished it again when he went to Qatar after 1.5 seasons or whatever it was, or 2.5 seasons, I should say. But then he went to Porto, got back on track, and then he came back to us, and both Porto and Beşiktaş rekindled it for him. And then he went on to win the Euros when he was playing for us, all that kind of stuff. He played an important role there. I think Beşiktaş can have a similar impact on Jadon Sancho. I think the fans will support him. And I think he will be successful enough to retain that support. And I think he could be a great success. But financially, it's going to be straining. And that is also something Adalı said, that the player needs to be willing to come, but also it needs to be doable financially. He doesn't want to put the future of the club at risk just to make a big transfer like that. And you could say, okay, but we did Orkun, we did Tammy. Yes, but Orkun, big fee, but 5 million a year is a lot of money, but it's not 10 million a year, Tammy's gonna, in his 3rd and 4th season, I think, make 7 million, which is a lot of money. But honestly, guys, I kind of think Tammy's gonna be back to the Premier League already at that point. So I don't think it'll ever really get to that. Hopefully, fingers crossed, because that means he will be very successful, of course. But Sancho, if you want to bring him in at the current wage, 9 million a year, that's a lot of money. But anyway, long story short, I think if we get Sancho, it's gonna be on the 1st or 2nd of September. Maybe it'll have to be on the 2nd of September or the 3rd of September, because the deadline for the UEFA list is the 3rd of September. So I think if you're going to sign someone like that, he needs to be able to play in the Conference League. And knock on wood, we will be in the Conference League stages at least. Hopefully. It won't be easy, but, we have to get there. That has to be our goal. So hopefully, if we're going to sign someone like that, we have to get that done. We have to get the paperwork done in time so we can submit his name to the UEFA list. The windows in Europe, in a lot of the top competitions, will close on the 30th. Is it the 30th of August or the 31st? Whatever. On the final day on August, windows will close in a lot of the top competitions. So that means on the 1st of September and on the 2nd of September, there will still be 48-ish hours for us to sign someone. I think Jadon Sancho is somebody, if he doesn't end up signing elsewhere, there's a very high probability that we sign him then. I think the chances of us signing him before that are small because he's probably going to prioritize a move somewhere else. Although, if by that time, maybe in 10 or 15 days, Atletico says, no, we found someone else. Dortmund says, no, we're not interested. Juventus have gone for somebody else. And those options dry up, then it can, of course, still happen before then. Hopefully, as well, Fenerbahce will have signed a left winger by then. Because you know them, they would try to swoop in and hijack. That's my reaction to the press conference. There were a lot of questions asked in the Q&A. I recommend you go and check those out on Twitter, on Haberkartala or something. They'll probably have transcripts of them. But a good press conference. I think he reiterated the course the club are going to go. I like the fact that he's saying Beşiktaş are not going to be signing 30-plus-year-old players, and if we do, it's going to be on short-term contract. I think that's really good. I think giving a 30-year-old Oxlade-Chamberlain a 3-year contract worth 9 million in total is absolutely ridiculous and dumb, and we should never ever make a mistake like that ever again. And looks good. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, hit that notification bell so you can be notified of any future videos. And check out patreon.com/BeşiktaşPodcast or hit the join button for more content just like this, because this is exactly what you get with the VIP exclusive podcast. This is the type of stuff you will get there. Consider supporting our podcast by doing so. And thanks again. Let's go Beşiktaş.